Grüß, willkommen in einem anderen video. Welcome to yet another exciting video, in this case episode 21 of my equipment series of videos. This video will be covering modern air-to-air missiles. This presentation was originally designed to assist me in creating aircraft values for a figure gaming set of rules called Commander, but is designed, that is the video, as an educational video for anyone to view. The development of aircraft missiles turned out to be a surprisingly interesting topic. The first form of radar guidance is beam riding. In this method, the attacking aircraft directs a narrow beam of radar energy at the target. The air-to-air missile was launched into the beam, or is launched into the beam, where sensors on the aft of the missile, controlling the missile, keeps it within the beam. So long as the beam was kept on the target aircraft, the missile would ride the beam until making an interception. While conceptually simple, the reality is anything but. Simultaneously keeping the beam solidly on the target, continuing to fly one's aircraft, and monitoring enemy countermeasures is a complex and difficult process. An added complication was that the beam will spread out into a cone shape as the distance from the attacking aircraft increases. This will result in less accuracy for the missile because the beam may actually be larger than the target aircraft when the missile arrives. The missile could be securely within the beam, but still not close enough to destroy the target. Apart from some early attempts, this method was abandoned rather quickly. Semi-active radar homing guided missiles are simpler and more common. They function by detecting radar energy reflected from the target. The radar energy is emitted from the launching aircraft's own radar system. The launch aircraft has to maintain a lock on the target or keep illuminating the target aircraft with its own radar until the missile makes an interception. This limits the attacking aircraft's ability to maneuver, which may be necessary should threats to the attacking aircraft appear. An advantage of these missiles is that they are homing on the reflected radar signal, so accuracy actually increases as the missile gets closer because the reflection comes from a point source, the target. Against this, if there are multiple targets, each will be reflecting the same radar signal, and the missile may become confused as to which target its intending victim, or is the intended victim. The missile may be unable to pick a specific target and fly through a formation without passing within lethal range of any specific aircraft. Newer missiles have logic circuits in their guidance system to help prevent this problem. At the same time, jamming the missile lock-on is easier because the launching aircraft is further from the target than the missile, so the radar signal has to travel further and is greatly attuned or reduced in strength over the distance. This means the missile may be jammed or spoofed by countermeasures whose signals grow stronger as the missile gets closer. One counter to this is a home-on-jam capability in the missile that allows it to home in on the jamming signal. Active radar-guided missiles carry their own radar system to detect and track the target. However, the size of the radar antenna is limited by the small diameter of the missile, limiting its range. Such missiles are launched at a predicted future location of the target, often relying on separate guidance systems such as global positioning systems, inertia guidance, or a mid-course update from either the launching aircraft or another system that can communicate with the missile to get the missile close to the target at a predetermined point, frequently based on time since launch or arrival near the predicted target location is the only thing we can really lock down. The missile's radar system is activated. The missile is said to go live at this point, and the missile then homes in on the target. If the range from the attacking aircraft to the target is within the range of the missile radar system, the missile can go active immediately upon launch. The great advantage of an active radar homing system is that it enables a fire-and-forget mode of attack, where the attacking aircraft is free to pursue other targets or escape the area after launching the missile. Infrared guided missiles home on the heat produced by the aircraft. Early infrared detectors had poor sensitivity, so could only track the hot exhaust pipes of an aircraft. This means an attacking aircraft had to maneuver to a position behind its target before it could fire an infrared guided missile. This also limited the range of the missile, as the infrared signature soon became too small to detect with increasing distance. And after launch, the missile was playing catch-up with its target. Early infrared seekers were unusable in clouds or rain, which is still a limitation today to some extent, and could be distracted or confused by the sun, a reflection of the sun off a cloud or ground object, or any other hot object within its view. More modern infrared-guided missiles can detect the heat of an aircraft's skin warmed by the friction of airflow, in addition to the fainter heat signals of the engine when the aircraft is seen from the side or head-on. This, combined with greater manoeuvrability, gives them an all-aspect capability, and an aircraft or an attacking aircraft no longer had to be behind its target to fire. Although launching from behind the target increases the probability of a hit, the launching aircraft usually has to be closer to the target in such a tail chase engagement. An aircraft can defend against infrared missiles by dropping flares that are hotter than the aircraft, so the missile homes in on the brighter, hotter targets. In turn, IR missiles may employ filters to enable to ignore targets whose temperature is not within a specific range. Towed decoys, which closely mimic engine heat and infrared jammers, can also be used. Some large aircraft and many combat aircraft make use of so-called hot brick infrared jammers, typically mounted near the engines. At the start of the 21st century, missiles can use an imaging infrared seeker which sees the target, much like a digital video camera, and can distinguish between an aircraft and a point heat source such as a flare. They also feature a very wide detection angle, so the attacking aircraft does not have to be pointing straight at the target for the missile to lock on. The pilot can use a helmet-mounted sight and target another aircraft by simply looking at it and then fire. This is called off-bore sight launch. For example, the Russian Su-27 is equipped with an infrared search and track system with laser rangefinders for its HMS-armed missiles. Anti-radiation missiles, normally used against ground installation, can also be used against other aircraft. The missile locks on the electronic radiation emitted by an aircraft and uses this to guide it to the target. Air-to-air passive anti-radiation missiles are used as a countermeasure against airborne early warning and control aircraft, which typically mount powerful search radars. Due to their dependence on target aircraft radar emissions, when used against fighter aircraft, passive anti-radiation missiles are primarily limited to forward aspect intercept geometry. Another aspect of passive anti-radiation homing is the home on jam mode, which allows a radar-guided missile to home in on the jammer of the target aircraft if the primary seeker is jammed by the electronic countermeasures of the target aircraft. Early short-range missiles, such as the early Sidewinders and K-13 or AA-2 Atoll, had infrared seekers with a narrow, normally 30-degree, field of view and required the attacker to position itself behind the target. This meant that the target aircraft only had to perform a slight turn to move outside of the missile seeker field of view and cause the missile to lose track of the target. Second-generation missiles utilize more effective seekers that improve the field of view to 45 degrees, making that evasion tactic I mentioned earlier more difficult. Third generation introduces an all-aspect missile because more sensitive seekers allows the attacker to fire at a target which was side-on to itself, or allowing it to do so, from all aspects, not just the rear. This means that while the field of view was still restricted to a fairly narrow cone, the attack at least did not have to be behind the target. The R-73 or AA-11 Archer Soviet missile entered service in 1985 and marked a new generation of dogfighting missile. It had a wider field of view and could be cued onto a target using a helmet-mounted sight. This allowed it to be launched at targets that would otherwise not be seen by older generation missiles that generally stared forward while waiting to be launched. This capability, combined with a more powerful motor that allowed the missile to maneuver against crossing targets and launch at a greater range, gave the launching aircraft improved tactical freedom. Other members of the fourth generation used focal plane arrays to offer greatly improved scanning and countermeasure resistance, especially against flares. These missiles are also much more agile, some by employing thrust vectoring. The latest generation, fifth generation of short-range missiles are again defined by advances in seeker technology, this time electro-optical imaging infrared seekers that allow the missiles to see images rather than a single point of infrared radiation or heat. The sensors combined with more powerful digital signal processing providing the following benefits: greater infrared countermeasure ability by being able to distinguish aircraft from infrared countermeasures such as flares, greater sensitivity meaning greater range and ability to identify smaller, low-flying aircraft such as UAVs, more detailed target imaging allowing targeting of more vulnerable parts of aircraft instead of just homing in on the brightest infrared source. That pretty much covers the basic technology of the missiles. Let's take a look at the missiles itself. Air-to-air missiles can be grouped into basically short-range or dogfight missiles, medium-range and long-range fire-and-forget missiles. The US developed a wide range of all these type of missiles. The Hughes AIM-4 Falcon was the first operational guided air-to-air missile of the United States Air Force. Development began in 1946. The weapon was first tested in 1949. The AIM-26 Falcon was a larger, more powerful version of the AIM-4 Falcon air-to-air missile built by Hughes. It is the only guided American air-to-air missile with a nuclear warhead to ever be produced. Out of concern for the problems inherent in using nuclear weapons over friendly territory, a conventional version, the GAR-11A, was developed using a 18-kilogram high-explosive warhead. The AIM-54 Phoenix is a radar-guided long-range air-to-air missile carried in clusters of up to 6 missiles on the Grumman F-14 Tomcat. It is its only operational launch platform. The combination of Phoenix missiles and the AN/AWG-9 guidance radar was the first aerial weapon system that could simultaneously engage multiple targets, as well as being the first operational long-range missile. The AIM-7 Sparrow is a medium-range, semi-active radar-homing air-to-air missile operated by the United States Air Force, United States Navy, and the United States Marine Corps, as well as other various air forces and navies. The AIM-120 Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile is a beyond visual range air-to-air missile capable of all-weather day and night operations, employing active transmit-receive radar guidance instead of semi-active receive-only radar guidance. It has the advantage of being a fire-and-forget weapon when compared to the previous generation Sparrow missiles. The AIM-120C version deliveries began in 1996. The C variant has been steadily upgraded since it was first introduced. The AIM-120C7 development began in 1998 and included improvements in homing and greater range. It was successfully tested in 2003 and is currently being produced for both domestic and foreign customers. It helped the US Navy replace the F-14 Tomcats with the FA-18 Super Hornets. With the loss of the F-14 long-range AIM-54 Phoenix missile, which had already been retired at this point, the longer-range AIM-120D helped to offset this loss of capability. The AIM-9 Sidewinder is a short-range air-to-air missile which entered service with the US Navy in 1956 and subsequently was adopted by the US Air Force in 1964. Since then, the Sidewinder has proven to be an enduring international success, and its latest variants are still standard equipment in most Western-aligned air forces. A second generation of the Sidewinder missile was introduced in 1970. These were followed from the mid-70s by the AIM-9L/P, which was a substantial improvement on the early versions, particularly with an improved rocket motor. The third generation of this missile, the AIM-9L/M, is an all-aspect missile. The AIM-9X Sidewinders, developed by Raytheon engineers, entered service in November 2003 with the United States Air Force. The lead platform is the F-15C, and also the United States Navy, which has the lead platform being the FA-18C, and is a substantial upgrade to the Sidewinder family, being a fifth-generation missile. The AIM-92 Stinger, or air-to-air Stinger, is an air-to-air missile developed from the shoulder-launched FIM-92 Stinger system for use on helicopters such as the AH-64 Apache, Eurocopter Tiger, and also UAVs such as the MQ-1 Predator. The missile itself is identical to the shoulder-launched Stinger. The UK also made an effort in developing air-to-air missiles, with several infrared guidance missiles being introduced, but they generally relied on US-manufactured missiles as time progressed. After the end of the Cold War, the British focused on cooperative development with other European countries, as well as leveraging US designs, rather than making their own indigenous systems. Fireflash was the United Kingdom's first air-to-air guided missiles to see service with the Royal Air Force. Constructed by Fairey Aviation, the missile utilised radar beam riding guidance. Fireflash has had relatively limited performance and required the launching aircraft to approach the target from a very limited angle astern. The de Havilland Firestreak is a British first-generation passive infrared homing air-to-air missile. It was developed by de Havilland Propellers in the early 1950s and was the first such weapon to enter active service with the Royal Air Force and Fleet Air Arm, equipping the English Electric Lightning, de Havilland Sea Vixen and Gloucester Javelin. It was a rear aspect fire-and-forget pursuit weapon with a field of attack of 20 degrees from either side of the target. The Red Top was the third indigenous British air-to-air missile to enter service, following the de Havilland Firestreak and limited service Fireflash. Originally a modified version of the Firestreak, Red Top emerged as a much more capable weapon with roughly double the range, a more sensitive seeker giving limited all-aspect capability, and an even larger warehouse than the already large one in Firestreak. Red Top was originally intended to replace Firestreak outright, but carrying the missiles on the English Electric Lightning required additional area to be added to the Lightning's vertical stabiliser. For this reason, Firestreak continued to be used on older models of the Lightning. Both missiles passed out of service in 1988 when the last of the Lightnings were retired. The Advanced Short-Range Air-to-Air Missile, also known by its United States identifier AIM-132, is an imaging infrared homing air-to-air missile produced by MBDA that is designed to dominate the within visual range combat mission. It's currently in service with the Royal Air Force and Royal Australian Air Force, replacing the AIM-9 Sidewinder. The French made an even more comprehensive effort at developing a full range of missile systems, producing both short and medium-range air-to-air missiles. The AA-20 was a French air-to-air missile developed by Nord Aviation and was one of the first of such missiles adopted into service in Western Europe. Production began at Châtillon, France in 1956. Approximately 6,000 missiles of the type were produced, and it remained in service until 1960. The AA-25 was aimed at addressing the major flaws of the AA-20, specifically the fact the missile could not be used at night or in poor weather. The French developed the AA-25, which was essentially a radar beam riding version of the AA-20, using the target tracking beam of the CSF Cyrano Ibis radar fitted to the Mirage 3C. Many AA-20 missiles were converted to AA-25 standard missile format. The R550 Magic is a short-range air-to-air missile developed in 1968 by French company Matra to compete with the American AIM-9 Sidewinder, and it was made backward compatible with the Sidewinder launch hardware. An upgraded version, the Magic 2, replaced the original model in 1986. 11,300 Magic 2s were produced. It was exported notably to Iraq and Greece, who actually used it in combat. The Matra R530 is a medium to short-range air-to-air missile. It was available in infrared homing and semi-active radar homing as the main armament of the Mirage 3, which was able to carry a single missile in the centre line. The Mirage F1, which carried two, one of each type, under the wings, and the F8 Crusader in French Navy service. The MBDA Mica is an anti-air multi-target, all-weather, fire-and-forget short and medium-range missile system. It is intended for use both by air platforms as individual missiles as well as ground units and from ships, which can be equipped with the rapid-fire Mica vertical launch system. It is fitted with a thrust vector control system. This missile was developed from 1982 onward by Matra. The first trials occurred in 1991, and the missile was commissioned in 1996 to equip the Rafale and Mirage 2000s. It is a replacement for both the Super 530 in the intercept role and the Magic 2 in the dogfighting role. In order to reduce the high development costs of air-to-air missile systems, many of the European nations have pooled their resources to create air-to-air missiles together. This has been done primarily, or at least initially, to support the Eurofighter project. The IRIS-T is a German-led program to develop a short-range infrared homing air-to-air missile to replace the AIM-9 Sidewinder found in some NATO member countries. Any aircraft capable of firing the Sidewinder is also capable of launching the IRIS-T. Meteor is an active radar-guided beyond-range air-to-air missile developed by MBDA. Meteor offers a multi-shot capability against long-range maneuvering targets and jets, UAVs and cruise missiles in a heavy electronic countermeasure environment with range well in excess of 150 kilometres. The PARS 3LR in German service, also known as the Trigat LR, and AC-3G in French service, is a fire and forget missile which can be used against ground or air targets. The Russians, like the US, have developed a full range of air-to-air missiles, while trailing the US during most of the Cold War. Many later missiles have similar, if not superior, specifications. This effort was likely done, or the additional investment was likely done in this area to counter overall US air superiority. The Kaliningrad K5, or NATO reporting name of AA-1 Alkali, was an early Soviet air-to-air missile. The difficulties associated with beam riding guidance, particularly in a single-seat fighter aircraft, were substantial, making the Alkali primarily a short-range anti-bomber missile. Around 1967, the K5 was replaced by the K55, which replaced the beam-riding seeker with a semi-active radar homing or infrared seeker of the K13 or AA-2 Atoll variety. The K55 remained in service through to about 1977, probably being retired with the last of the Su-9 interceptors. The K-13, or NATO reporting name, AA-2 Atoll, is a short-range, infrared homing air-to-air missile. It is similar in appearance and function to the American AIM-9 Sidewinder, from which it was reverse-engineered. While the R3S was being introduced in 1961, work started on a semi-active radar homing version for high-altitude use, the K-13R, with an 8-kilometre range, similar to the little-used US Navy AIM-9C Sidewinder. This took longer to develop and did not enter service until 1966. This version was designated AA-2B Atoll by NATO. The Kaliningrad K-8, or NATO reporting name AA-3 ANAB, was a medium-range air-to-air missile developed for interceptor aircraft use. The R4, or NATO reporting name AA-5 ASH, was an early long-range air-to-air missile. It was used primarily as the sole weapon of the Tupolev Tu-128 interceptor. The R-40, or NATO reporting name AA-6 Acrid, is a long-range air-to-air missile developed between 1960 and 1969 specifically for the MiG-25P interceptor, but can also be carried by the later MiG-31. It is the largest air-to-air missile in the world to ever go into production. The R-23, or NATO reporting name AA-7 Apex, is a medium-range air-to-air missile developed by Vyempel in the Soviet Union for fighter aircraft. An updated version with greater range, the R-24, replaced it in service. It is comparable to the American AIM-7 Sparrow, both in terms of overall performance as well as role. The R-60, or NATO reporting name AA-8 Aphid, is a short-range, lightweight infrared homing air-to-air missile designed for use by Soviet fighter aircraft. It has been widely exported and remains in service with the CIS and many other nations. The R-33, or NATO reporting name AA-9 Amos, is a long-range air-to-air missile developed by Vyempel. It is the primary armament of the MiG-31 interceptor, intended to attack large, high-speed targets such as the SR-71 Blackbird, the B-1 Lancer bomber, and the B-52 Stratofortress. The R-27 missile, or NATO reporting name AA-10 Alamo, is a medium to long-range air-to-air missile developed by the Soviet Union. It remains in service with the Russian Air Force and Air Forces of the Commonwealth of Independent States. The R-27T AA-10 Alamo B is an infrared homing version of the AA-10. It uses passive homing using the Avto Matika 9B1032 IR seeker head. The R27ER AA-10 Alamo-C is the semi-active radar homing extended range version of this missile system. The R27ET AA-10 Alamo-D is the infrared homing extended range version of this missile system. The R-73, or NATO reporting name AA-11 Archer, is a short-range air-to-air missile developed by Vyempel NPO that entered service in 1984. The R-77 missile, or NATO reporting name AA-12 Adder, is a Russian medium-range active radar homing air-to-air missile. It is the Russian counterpart to the American AIM-120 and AMRAAM missile. The R-37M, or NATO reporting name AA-13 Axe-Head, is a Russian supersonic air-to-air missile with a very long range. It was designed to shoot down tankers, AWAC and other C-41 Star aircraft, C-4I Star aircraft, communication, intelligence aircraft, while keeping the launch platform out of range of any fighters that may be protecting the target. The Germans were developing guided air-to-air missiles in World War II, with the X-4 being the closest to being in production. The Ruhlstahl Ru-344X4, or the Ruhlstahl Kramer RK-344, was a wire-guided air-to-air missile designed by Germany during World War II. The X-4 did not see operational service and thus was not proven in combat, but as many as 1,000 missiles may have been produced before the end of the war. Originally designed to be used in a single-seat fighter, this was abandoned and instead the Ju-88 was selected as the launch platform. It required one crew member to fire and guide the missile to its target, leaving the pilot to fly the launch aircraft. And so I come to a close of my episode 20 of my equipment series of videos, in this case aircraft air-to-air missiles. Just a quick note, I originally created this video in 2020, so any developments that have been occurring since 2020, specifically December 2020, is not reflected in this video, so please take note. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.